Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Hearthstone. It's been a while. Terrible things have happened. Today is Monday, September 2nd. I don't believe we streamed on the previous Wednesday, so it may have been last Monday was the last Hearthstone stream. Well, I woke up in the middle of the night just to tell the whole story and try to make it short. I woke up in the middle of the night, my computer wasn't on. That's weird, my computer is on 24/7. That might be an indication of something here. I want to double check to see if I want to do these 3 tavern brawls or not, because winning 3 tavern brawls can be a pain in the butt. Spells, fill your decks with them. Each of these spells will summon a random minion of the same cost when played. I don't know if I want to do that, so while it's not financially smart to do this, I'm going to re-roll the Tavern Brawl, and yeah, we can probably get all of these just playing Warlock and maybe a little Secret Paladin. I woke up in the middle of the night and my computer was off. That was weird, certainly, and so I go trying to fix it and get it to turn on, and it won't turn on. So half asleep and now not in particularly a satisfactory calm mood, since being a YouTuber, having a computer not work means you can't really do your job. I went about the process of diagnosing it. So what it was doing was, it was when I pushed the power button, it would come on for a second and then it would reset, and it would come on for a second and then it would reset. I started slowly pulling things out, trying to diagnose what could be the thing that's broken. Clearly there's something low level broken with this, some kind of short. I did find a screw at the base of my case, which was, I believe, almost certainly from the M2 connector that I put in. So the first thing I took out was the new SSD I just installed and said, oh, did this thing somehow introduce some kind of short into the system? I take that out, it's not that. The screw wasn't anything, it was at the base of the case. It wasn't that either. Although having a floating screw in your case is completely unacceptable. I start pulling out RAM, and it doesn't seem like it's the RAM. I would not pull out the CPU or the cooler for the CPU, because if I did that, then I'd have to clean it off and put new thermal paste on it, and frankly, if I'm pulling out the CPU, then there's really no way to determine whether it's the CPU or the motherboard that was shorted out. So there would be no solution other than just building a whole new computer. So I thought it was the video card. Being half asleep, I probably wasn't thinking it as clearly as I would, but this was an emergency situation. Actions needed to be taken. I needed that video card. If it was the video card, I would have needed a new video card. Turns out it wasn't the video card. Turns out it was actually the power supply, which I had lost my power supply tester somewhere, or I never owned a power supply tester, and I just think I did. I think I owned one, but I may have given it away. My tools are in my garage, just getting lost effectively in a nexus. It's really not a good situation. So I ordered a new video card. The new video card takes 2 days to arrive. I installed what is a 2080 RTX, which 2080 is right there in the middle as far as the field of video cards, but a very expensive video card. You're talking, if not $500, just slightly below $500 for a new video card. I did need a new video card. Like, in all fairness, going from a GTX 970 to a 2080 is a acceptable, reasonable upgrade. It's just not an upgrade that needed to be done at that moment. Finances have not been particularly great, so a unexpected $500 expenditure is not something that I'm happy about. So when I plug in the video card and it doesn't work, at that point I have no idea what's going on. I've lost all confidence. I don't know what's wrong with this computer. As a guy who's built a computer a long time ago, a lot of computers. It's not just I built one computer a long time ago. I built a lot of computers. This resetting function was not locking into my brain as something that I'd seen before. Now, I very probably have seen it before, in all fairness. But normally on older computers, if the power supply is out, the computer just doesn't work. It doesn't turn on and reset. Once I finally did order a power supply tester, it turned out that only one of the voltages, apparently, I assume a capacitor burnt out or something, only one of the voltages was not holding a steady voltage. So there was, in the many pins that plug into a ATX connector, there was electricity certainly going through it. So the power supply failed in a bad way, in my opinion. I would say it should have done its own kind of self-test before it sent any power out, but those things are so cheap that I bet no power supply does that. So mostly this just boils down to me being rusty. Like, I haven't worked on computers in half a decade, and even though my computer myself that I was working on is half a decade old, I just didn't make the right determination. And what had happened is, when I had taken the video card out, almost certainly that had caused the power supply to not pull as much current, so it stayed on a little bit longer, and I just didn't wait long enough to see that, oh yeah, that reset too. So, huge mistake. Ended up buying a new video card and found out that that wasn't it. At that point, I literally took my computer to like an Office Max and a Staples. The person at the Office Max counter said he thought it was this power supply too, so I was glad for the second opinion. But then he also said that we don't sell anything but hard drives. We have no power supply units, and that's the only reason I went to a store instead of ordering from Amazon or online somewhere else, is because I thought, oh, I could go to an office supply store and actually get these components right now. It would make sense that you could get those components right now at an office supply store. And at a point, that was true. This is another example of me just not being in the field and being rusty. It used to definitely be true that you could buy power supplies. You couldn't buy everything. Like, you wouldn't really have a large selection of video cards. Apparently they don't sell video cards anymore either. But yeah, a cheap video card, a power supplies, a few things besides hard drives were at office supply stores. Now, not so much. Which does tell me if I was ever going to run a computer shop, then I would need to have even more inventory and just backup equipment than I would have assumed I would have needed. Just because it took another day after going to those two stores to order through Amazon, another 2 days to get the power supply. So then 4 days of no Hearthstone, 4 days of no computer at all. I'm sitting around literally figuratively tearing my hair out, just going crazy. There's literally nothing I can do. I could have worked on my server a little bit, but mostly I just slept. Mostly I'm just like, this sucks, and there's kind of nothing I can do, so I'll just move on from that. So yeah, 4 days of no Hearthstone. I did get on my tablet, so the good news is nowadays I have a cell phone. I have my old cell phone that maybe I could plug in and get to work. I have my tablet, so there are backup computers, but none of those are equipped or capable of streaming or recording. I really couldn't do anything with my server. Almost certainly my server's power supply will burn out in the next year or so too, so at that point I probably should be ready to replace that. But yeah, it definitely hasn't been a fun week. I went through the news, and we've got a ton of news that we'll start talking about here in a second. A lot of news certainly happened over this point. One of the things that did happen is I heard of a more local computer store that might have sold electronics, that the Office Max person, they were very helpful, they were just not capable of actually doing anything. So I actually made a point of shaking hands with the guy and thanking him, when that's not something I typically do when somebody is just doing their job. So yeah. He pointed out a local store. I went on the local store's website. The local store said that they were open till like 8 p.m. I go to the store. The sign on the front says they close at 7 p.m. It was past 7 p.m. And this is effectively why I never buy anything outside at local stores, is because you have a bunch of stores that don't have any inventory or the things you need constantly, particularly in the computer and electronics field. You have to travel a pretty decent distance most of the time to go to a store, and then you have their websites are not useful or accurate. Like, the only thing their website needed to say was the correct time that they shut down, and also they close. That's a problem. Like, I'm a bit of a night owl, second shift, third shift. It is really difficult if you're awake between the hours of 4 p.m. and 6 a.m. to go to stores, when a lot of stores close at 5 or 6 or 7 in the evening and don't open until 7 in the morning the next day.
Your nightmare.
So yeah, that sucks. I did briefly even consider, on a side note, just to scrounge up some cash, I considered taking like a part-time job at the local computer store just to increase my physical activity, because let's face it, being a YouTuber is just sitting in a chair, and it's not inaccurate to say that I have gotten very physically unhealthy in the past couple of years being just a YouTuber. So I mulled that over, and it's certainly a thought, but the problem with it inherently is the only reason I'd ever consider, I even considered it, since it is effectively a retail position, and I would never consider a retail position, is there was a little bit of desperation. It's like, yeah, it would be nice to get a paycheck or two of regular, even minimum wage money compared to the nothing that YouTube pays. But also, it was because it was a retail job selling computer components and electronic geek things in general. So yeah, I kind of mulled that over, but then I started to think about, like, looking at the application as, like, could I really fill out an application and get hired when I say, oh, I really only want to work a few hours, and maybe I only really want to work for a brief amount of time, like a seasonal or a temp agency, and really I don't want to do this job anyways, and really if I were to take a retail job, it would have to be not somebody standing on the floor and not somebody standing in the back with these, messing with the boxes and you know, stocking and all of that. I would have to be sitting at a desk. I'd have to be at some kind of position that was just really working on computers and really being an IT guy inside a retail store, not being somebody who's a fan of computer stuff, but really is just a salesman. As a salesman, I don't know anything, frankly, as far as brands and such. So the first few months would be just me reading the backs of boxes and going, yeah, I've heard of this brand. Like, I don't know anything about EVGA. I can only really tell you about my experience with purchasing Gigabyte equipment, which I know I've never seen a store hold on to Gigabyte equipment, and I don't know if that is because they don't get as good of a cut on the percentages, but I think that is kind of what EVGA is that they have a good partner program where you can get their equipment cheaper so that you can resell it and mark it up. I'm not sure that electronics really have the 200% markup I do. The other thought would be, if I did work at like a retail computer shop, I might want to fast track myself into being like a manager. Like, all of this bar rescue that I've been watching has inspired that thought a little bit, and it would certainly allow me to then be less physically active, because I'd just be the person in charge of telling other people what to do, and other things, of course. So yeah, that's a thought I was thinking, but I don't think it's something that I would move forward with. On the other hand, I think I occasionally do get approached by job placement temp agencies looking for real IT job positions. I think I'm going to start responding to those more, so there is a chance that at some point my channel will probably drop Hearthstone streaming completely. I think that would be it. We dropped the live streaming completely, and the pre-recorded will just go as far as it can go, but then it would just kind of run out of steam eventually. That's where I think that would line up.
Double time and double pay.
Yeah, there was no reason to do that
Attack
like
mode.
that. That was dumb. I should have done that with Rush to kill it.
Job's done.
So yeah, almost certainly nothing will come about from that thought, but yeah, we are definitely a step further away from sticking with YouTube as a full-time endeavor, because it's just not paying. It just isn't, and eventually there will be a point when I can't really afford to spend as much effort as I am doing something as a hobby that should be a career. The intention of the YouTube channel was always to be a potential income source, and that when the YouTube Partner Program cheated everybody out of being in the YouTube Partner Program, or the small-time creators, at least, that's when things started to not make any sense. Like, ideally, I had hoped to make a YouTube channel where I'd worked really, really hard to make a lot of videos that would become evergreen, and it would get popular enough that it would always get enough videos that it would get potentially like $300 a week, just $1,200 a month extra cash when I retire type thought. 1,200 is probably not enough. It probably need to be about double that, and then I could retire and not do anything else, and just live on a reasonable amount of income that you can't really guarantee would ever happen. Inherently, now that I think about it, even if I did have a YouTube channel that was making that much income, it's so inconsistent and so up to YouTube whether they really want to pay you or not that could disappear at any point. So it's hardly the guaranteed income that you might have from having like a retirement account, which that's barely guaranteed. That's not really guaranteed income either, but it would be a little bit safer than trusting just YouTube. In particular, if YouTube just shut down, which that could happen. So I'm gonna leave it up to you as we're wrapping up this story. It's really a matter of your own opinion, and I think this really does boil down to just an opinion or not. I've had a lot of experiences where I've taken jobs out of desperation, and I've regretted it every single time. That may be just my experience. It may be my perception on the experiences. But I don't think, personally, I want to go down that route yet again and take a job out of desperation. Now, for most people, you don't get that luxury. Fully, you've got to, if you need to go work at McDonald's, you go work at McDonald's. And then somehow you find enough energy and time to apply for other jobs and try to get better. But most people working at McDonald's even right now are probably looking for other jobs and having trouble finding anything better. McDonald's, Walmart, those types of things. So, currently in the position I'm in, I don't want to make that mistake again. Like, I don't want my entire career path to be just a series of mistakes, and kind of up until this point, it has been a series of mistakes. Jobs I should have walked off earlier. The most successful job I had, probably about halfway through that career, I should have just quit, because it was just all downhill after the halfway point. A boss changed, and basically the way the business was run was changed. Actually, a boss and the boss's boss changed. And once there was that different leadership in there, and more of a focus on just, frankly, they were trying to fire everybody, and eventually they succeeded at firing everybody and shutting down the office. But I stuck with that frustration for several years, and there was no reason to do that. I should have just said screw it. At a certain point, I did say just screw it, but it was way too long on that. And yeah, I had other jobs that that I quit, but then I've had other jobs that I should have quit. And sadly, the sad statement is I don't think I've ever had a job that went the way it should have. And I don't think that's just because I'm picky or anything. There's been a lot of jobs that have had problems with one thing or the other, and every job is going to have a problem, but I've had just a terrible run of incompetent management or terrible co-workers, or it's not even like a consistent thing. And let's see, there was one that had cheap management that wasn't upgrading any of the equipment, and that really needed to be upgraded, and all of the employees were super negative, which is funny because as I start to explain all of these, it'll sound like I'm the negative one, which there might be some truth to that. I might have been driven to be pretty negative in my experiences. There was a job that the first job I ever worked that was like hugely physically demanding, and I wasn't physically capable of that, so they got rid of me in less than half an hour, and I was more than happy to be gone. So that probably the first job I ever worked is the best experience I ever had, where I worked for less than half an hour and they fired me for not being physically capable of unloading a truck full of furniture or something like that. There's a job where it was incompetent management that didn't bother to interview anybody for this job, so everybody that they hired just off the resume, whatever they said on the resume, they didn't check references either. They didn't do anything. So it was just this group of people not qualified to work. Frankly, some of them were not qualified to work any job, let alone the job they were supposed to be doing. But that's incompetent management. But also the co-workers. Then one job I had, the most successful job I had, was the co-workers were perfectly fine. Of a group of over 300, there was only one, maybe two people in the entire group that were in any way problematic to anybody. Or me. That's the beauty of cubicles in general. It's like if you just have cubicles and you have a job where you're not really working with people on your same level, and there's just a bunch of associates, it's really easy to get along with most of them, and not just like get along. I really liked those co-workers. It was just the management hated them and tried to fire them, and eventually did fire all of them. So yeah, a lot of times it is management. It does roll uphill when it comes to businesses. Your business will be as good as you manage it in almost every scenario. You're not just going to randomly roll the dice and get a collection of employees that are just way worse than your average employee. The only way you get that is when you don't bother to interview, or you don't have at least enough social skills to say, this person does not look the part. I mean, it is literally just profiling. You play the part when you go to an interview, you make yourself look presentable, you say the things that they want you to hear, want you to say, and everybody does the song and dance, and because everybody knows and does the song and dance, you hire those people, and then you hope that they will continue to do the song and dance throughout their career. Let's see. I had one job which was straight up just a lie. I can't really say too much other than that. It was full of a bunch of what seemed like kind of lazy. Well, at least one employee was super lazy. I don't know anything about the other employees because they just did not engage with me at all, and almost certainly that's because they knew that it was a fake job, that they had just hired me so that the boss could go on vacation. And as the day the boss came back from vacation, he just fired me. So they lied and said this was a permanent job when it was in no way a permanent job. That's just immoral, dishonest management, quite frankly, and that is part of the problem of dealing with temp agencies in general, is that they will lie to you, and bosses in general will lie to you, but temp agencies will often lie to you and say, oh yeah, it's a 30-day probation, but it could become a full-time thing. It never becomes a full-time thing. Like, it really doesn't. If somebody is too lazy to do the payroll and hire somebody directly, and they're going through a temp agency, they're also more than likely too lazy to actually hire somebody permanently. Also, at least during the time, there was a lot of effort to get rid of people that might get healthcare, and I don't know where healthcare sits nowadays as far as that, but they would not want to hire anybody because they didn't want to have to pay any kind of healthcare or any kind of special things over the paycheck, any kind of life insurance or anything for the employee. So a lot of jobs, just because they were, it wasn't even a financially smart maneuver, it was just a propaganda maneuver. But a lot of jobs, at least during that time, were definitely hiring people every 30 days, then firing them, and then hiring them again. Unemployment insurance is another issue there, where if you haven't been working for like 2 years straight somewhere, then you don't qualify for unemployment insurance. At some point, the United States federal support of unemployment insurance ran out during one of their many government shutdowns, and I don't think they ever renewed it after that point. So it went from like 6 months of unemployment insurance, which is not enough because it takes way longer than 6 months to find a good replacement job, instead of just, again, getting desperate and working at McDonald's.
Mind if I roll
So,
me?
yeah. So I'm rambling here, but yeah, I've got jobs on my mind. I'm thinking about it, but if I am going to take a position with someplace, it needs to be the right thing. It needs to be something that I can actually live with, not something that's just going to make me super upset and frustrated. It doesn't help my life at all if I work someplace that puts food in my belly and then destroys everything in my soul and brain, which is definitely what the situation was for one of my jobs. Is that it was such a frustrating nightmare job. It was paying well, but the hours were so weird. I could never do anything else. I could never have any kind of life. And there's no point in making money and not having a life. And that's what a lot of people fall into. That's that workaholic mentality. That's the stupid pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which as a phrase is an impossible thing to do. Literally, anytime someone says that, it shows that they're an idiot. Because it's impossible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But yeah, overworking, killing yourself to make money. I suppose if you've got a family, if you've got someone supporting that is living off you, if you've got kids, maybe then you take that mentality. things certainly change that way. But if that's not even a really good move, I can guarantee you every absentee workaholic parent out there, if you interview their kids, would like to see their parents more. Well, more on average, at least. There definitely are some jerk parents out there that the kids are like, we're so glad they work so much. We're so glad we never see them.
I am your nightmare.
But yeah, if you want to be a good parent, you can't just work. You can't just provide. You have to actually physically be there. You have to actually interact. If you want to be a good spouse, you have to physically be there, and you have to interact with the people. You can't just work 60 hours a week and think it's all good. That's a business arrangement at that point if you're just working and nothing else, and that's not what a family relationship should be. Anyways, let's start covering the news, and I guess we'll start with the biggest news. By the way, OBS with 2 video cards installed. This right now you're seeing is the 2070 video card. You cannot capture any footage on your second video card. So where I could extend my desktop to have 4 monitors, probably I could extend the desktop to even like 8 monitors between the 970 GTX and the 2080. I could probably have 8 monitors if I wanted. Only 4 of those that would be connected to the 2080 can be captured and recorded. So my automatic scene switcher that would move from display monitor 1 to display monitor 2 on the right side was not capable of working the way I had it set up earlier today, unfortunately, which that means it would have I had the second monitor on the 970 so that it would theoretically not take up any of the GPU power of the game I was playing, which the game I'm playing, by the way, is Control. I'll be live streaming that probably later tonight. I'm trying an experiment here where I'm making the recordings live in sporadic random amounts, and then the pre-recorded footage just goes up when it goes up. Particularly since I got Control, which is from the Epic Store. I know I hate it, but what can you say? I got the game for free with the video card. I also got Wolfenstein Youngblood, so I imagine I'll take the opportunity to play that at a point also. So yeah, since I have Control, since it's a brand new game, since it's an Epic Store exclusive, there's some chance here that this might get me more views, and I can tell you it was at least a few more views than just Hearthstone, because Hearthstone really has gotten down to it's getting 1 view per live stream, and Control, even in the middle of the night, is getting 3 or 4 views, even not being really labeled or anything like that.
We are friends now. Hello, friends.
So yeah, I always knew that buying brand new games would be the best way to make my channel succeed somewhat more. I don't know if it succeeds by a great amount more, because I wouldn't be surprised if my channel, as far as the YouTube recommendation algorithm, is just at the bottom of the list always now. So yeah, I'm trying to try that. I don't really see a reason to do that for things like Torchlight, like playing an old game live doesn't really change too much, but it might make some sense. So I could play Secret Paladin right now, or I could leave this. We also need to win 5 more things. All of the monthly things turned over, so let's see, where's the latest card deck? This is the new favorite card, and then there's one new card I got as the rank reward, which is just this golden card, which we can disenchant that, where this is uncraftable, so I can't disenchant that. Yeah, we might as well do all the daily quests today, frankly. I should have also been playing ranked. So yeah, I'm gonna play Control. I'm gonna get to Wolfenstein Youngbloods, I guess, immediately after I finish all of Control and play that. Control will probably air either in November or December, and then I'll get back to Torchlight and finish that, and then play Torchlight 2. So there will be almost certainly a significant number of weeks break between Torchlight, which is probably fine because it's not like that game has a great story to follow. I can say so far in the Control, which I might be as close as 3/4 of the way through the game because I'm just mad burning through it in the live streams. I think Control suffers from being an E3 darling, having this major trailer, hyping itself up certainly a lot, and the actual game that they give you that I've experienced so far is kind of an awkwardly balanced it's kind of an awkwardly balanced just generic third-person shooter with some quantum Remedy style / Quantic Dream style extreme close-ups, fancy graphics. It seems like they spent a lot of a lot of their budget was spent in Control to make these live action videos and pay actors, I think, a lot more money than they should have to make these live action videos and do face scans for conversations, where I feel like if you had just shifted some of that budget around, you could have had more characters and more interesting effects. Control, in a lot of ways, probably would have been better if it was something like LA Noire, where it was in a bigger open world city and you would go to different houses and different events and see different people. Yeah, it would have been very interesting to see Control done with the budget of Rockstar instead of being done in kind of a shoestring budget where you're just in this house, this building called the Oldest House, and that's the only place you are. And it heavily takes on brutalist architecture, which I don't mind some of the level being brutalist architecture, but you barely get a change at all. Otherwise, there's like maybe a section that, in the maintenance section, that looks, the maintenance floor looks a little bit different, but not quite different enough. There's no secrets at all in this deck, is there? We're gonna have to figure out which deck has secrets in it. So yeah, in a lot of ways, Control is the old TV series Friday the 13th series. There are these objects of power. I don't think you're even going to deal with with too many of them though. There's some that have been referenced, but I think they're just going to be referenced, where others are going to be collectible, but only 4 of them are going to be collectible. The way the menu looks. So unless we start getting more objects of power that replace the current objects of power, I don't think there's anything to that. That's custom hunter. Maybe hunter over here. Mech hunter. Secret paladin. Let's try that. I don't know if that really is secret paladin or not. So it goes in a weird way in which the main character starts the game kind of knowing a lot more than she's letting on, and so instead of her being the person that should be asking a bunch of questions and letting the player learn and understand things, she becomes the person that people come to for all the answers, and because the game makes you the director of the building immediately, so you've skipped an entire hero's journey where she could have saved the day and then become the director, or become the true director. No, she's immediately given authority, and because she's given authority, everybody listens to her. She's there for her own purposes, so she's often doing this internal monologue stuff where she thinks to herself out, and you hear that, and that's not very good at all. It's just bad writing. The level design is not what I'd like for Control. It really is a fine game. I'd imagine it's a solid 7.5 or even 8, but it's getting 8.5s and 9.0s, and unless there's something I haven't seen yet, I don't know why. I think it's probably a mainstream video game developer critics darling. Remedy Software, creators of Alan Wake. I also didn't like Alan Wake, so clearly this is not my style of content from the way this plays out. So yeah, I'm getting through it. I'll play through it. I'll do the main story. The game Control is designed to have loot boxes in it, but it doesn't have loot boxes in it. So you collect a bunch of materials to make upgrades that really just feels like elements that shouldn't be happening at all. It feels like a smaller, shorter story would be appreciated, instead of the grinding. The fights are incredibly unbalanced in Control. Either I'll run into a scenario where I die over and over again, and then eventually it will take pity on me and make it really easy, or I'll come into a scenario where it's super easy to win. You get one weapon that you change to other types of weapons, but they don't visually look any different, nor do they barely even feel much different. And once you get the weapon variation called Pierce, I've found that works particularly well against any of the enemies that are strong, and it's a little too slow to use on anything that's not strong, so I wouldn't really recommend using Pierce on the regular people. But then you also have a side, like a few telekinetic abilities. So to replace not having a grenade, even though the enemies have grenade, you have a thing called launch where you just grab something telekinetically and throw it. That works almost like a grenade, but not quite, because you have to actually be looking at the person and hit them directly on with the item that you're flinging. Certain items, there's a ton of destructible environment in the world. Certain items you pick up will explode when you throw them at people, certain items won't. So there's no secret in this deck either. By the way, I'm just gonna have to go through all of my characters and see what has any secrets. It's probably a mage. So yeah, the enemy collection and control is pretty generic. It's just soldiers that have been infected by a magical extra-dimensional entity, and so they have kind of a red hiss on them. But when you shoot them, they also get kind of this pearlescent appearance of fog around them when they're hit, but not when they're dead per se. So it feels like they're hiding blood splatter, but there also is blood splatter, so maybe that disappears. This game is designed poorly to run with the ray tracing. I have ray tracing on. It is nice in a few places to actually see a mirror work instead of the tricks that have been done before that, using reflection textures or maps, or just not having mirrors or glasses work. But it's not worth it. It seems like, in particular in Control, they turned down the brightness in dark rooms, so it's incredibly dark, and the game desperately needs a flashlight. Like it needs a patch for it's not running smoothly on my computer in some small points. I've run into a few hiccups. It needs a patch to adjust the difficulty, and it needs a patch to add a flashlight in it. It's got the Doom 3 problem of it just being way too dark in some areas, but then when you see some lights with the ray tracing, it's blindingly bright also. So clearly there's a lack of balance there. I don't think the ray tracing is worth it, frankly. I think the time they spent and the energy, the money they spent in implementing ray tracing could have been used in a lot of other places. There's a lot of copy and pasting. You go into every single bathroom and they will look extremely similar. There's no soap in the bathrooms, by the way, just for your information. That they don't put mirrors in the bathroom, they don't put soap in the bathrooms. Maybe they put a canonical reason why that is the case, but it's just not there. Also, the sinks are at your crotch level, which is way too low in all of the bathrooms. So they try to make it feel like they spent a lot of effort during this architectural brutalist design, but then they missed some basic ideas that show, oh, they really didn't care about the architectural design at all. They just had a texture and thought that would be good enough. Is there a secret in this? The new GPU, no, PSU, the new power supply unit of my computer has a fan that only turns on when there's a high power draw, and I don't know if I'm hearing the fan because of that, or if I'm hearing the fan from like the 2080 or the even the 970, because the 970 now is in a different place, and I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't strap down a cord tight enough, or something is leaning on something else. I really am unconfident about my computer abilities at the moment. After such a screw up, it shooken me in part to my core. I know with more practice I would be able to get back into the groove, but I kind of need a second opinion, like doctors do. Like, I kind of need somebody looking over my shoulder telling me things, and I definitely have blind spots of things that I just never learned. I was extremely late to just learning that there were different types of screws that meant different things in computers, because there's quite a few different types of screws, and they all look exactly the same, but they aren't quite exactly the same. And so yeah, there's definitely things that I was slow to pick up when I first learned computers too. Like, I hot swapped a bunch of hard drives, which is something you can set up and do nowadays, but it was definitely not something that you could do in the old days. So I would plug in a hard drive, the data part, not even the power part, while the computer was turned on, and it would just ruin the hard drives immediately. And I was not able to recognize that's what was happening when I was first learning computers. Unfortunately, I learned that issue pretty quickly. Like, I have no secrets. There's literally no secrets here. Not a single one of these decks has any secrets in it. Alright. So let's see if we can make a secret paladin real quick. Let's see. Secret. This. 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 Alright. Complete a draw. Complete the deck there. And we'll just call this Secrets. And we'll hop into that. I guess I could probably go on. I don't know why I'm playing ranked here. That's stupid. There's no way that deck is gonna win in ranked play. I could go on talking about control, but frankly, there's 6 hours of live stream footage, probably closer, maybe to 10 hours actually. Actually, I think it is 10 hours of live stream footage on my channel from the past couple days. So today is Labor Day in the United States. I don't know if that means I'll get more views or less views. I wouldn't be surprised if it's less views. Let's just hold on to everything except for that. But yeah, I don't think Control's bad. I think it has a lot of problems. I think it has a case in which it very specifically wanted to make a TV series, and it feels very much like a TV series, or maybe an episodic game, but it's not an episodic game, so that kind of doesn't make sense either.
Job's done.
So yeah, there's weird choices, weird decisions that are made as far as where the budget went. A lot of the encounters I feel like could have been improved upon greatly if there were slightly fewer people and just more people spawning. I think if they had done something like The Evil Within, it would have worked really well in Control, where The Evil Within, you would kind of just black out and be in a different environment, and the world would be completely different. Whereas in this game, you're in Control, you're pretty much in the place you're going to be always, until you get on an elevator and go somewhere else.
I know what you did.
I can't do that.
Turn. So yeah, I kind of just want to wrap up the story. I feel like if they had maybe done something more closer to a Fallout game and had more just generic random first-person shooting instead of corridor narrow first-person shooting, there's, I think, something that could be said there too.
It's going to be okay. Show me.
Yeah, there's a lot of tight corridor things, and the path making is not good. Like, gameplay elements are not good in it. The first person shooting's not tight. The concept, even when the trailer was shown, people should have been suspect of. Like, because Control, when that trailer at E3 a couple years came out, showed the main character flying. And I have yet to get the flying ability. I think you're gonna get it, but it's gonna be close to the end of the game when you get it. It will help in a few places, but not a lot of places. And I've never seen, and I don't believe Control is going to be the first game ever to successfully have flight combat succeed and be a good experience.
It's going to be okay. Show me.
So they were promising something bigger than what they could really deliver on, even during E3. Control does not feel like a horror game in any way. It feels like a X-Files episode when it was one of the not so serious early episodes, would be my guess. I didn't watch X-Files, but like the side story episodes before it was all about the Men in Black and aliens and conspiracies, like they were super serious, like, and that could have worked. I feel like if you'd made less combat and made it more like Life is Strange, where there's a lot more conversation, and conversation was the big part of the gameplay, that would have worked kind of well too. But that's not what happens. You talk to maybe 4 people at so far that I've seen. There's like 4 people that are in charge of departments of the building that you're in, and that's it. There's been some other people that you've saved that will say some random side sentences, but they just say them out loud. They don't actually converse to you. The actual conversations you do have with the main people are not good. There's a weird face scanning thing that they did where the lips are synchronized, but the motions of the lips do not, to me, look like they are speaking English. And I don't know, maybe if Remedy's like a French company or something, but yeah, you'll see the lip flaps look right, but when they're smiling to make one sound, a different sound comes out. It looks very disconnecting. There's a big split between some cutscenes and other cutscenes. I heavily suspect that there was budgetary issues and that they rushed to finish the game. But I also feel like there was probably just a case of they didn't really have good direction. And because they didn't have good direction, they were allowed to kind of meander. If you told me that every level, which every level of the building is effectively a level of the game, they're pretty big levels, but they're not that big. This doesn't feel like a Resident Evil 4 experience where you go so far in Resident Evil 4. It doesn't feel anything like that. And you go to different places in most games. You don't just go to a different floor of a building. The floors of the building don't look that different. But if you had told me each of those levels were actually leftover levels that had been that had been made for some other game, and they just copy and pasted and added all of that together to make the game, and then they just had a general concept of what Control's story was going to be, I would believe that. I would totally believe that this was all put together at the last minute.
I know what you did.
For justice.
But then I could also believe that they were halfway through development and they got told to wrap it up, and they just quickly wrapped it up. The main character is uninteresting. And these are criticisms that, like, I've heard other people say, and it seems so odd. So, in a weird way, because Control is an Epic Games Store exclusive on PC, and it's having trouble running on a standard PS4, Control is going to have such bad word of mouth by the time 6 months are around and it comes out on Steam. I would not be surprised if it has hugely underwhelming sales just because of that.
Got something to hide?
I would not be surprised one bit if it barely sells anything. And I also would fully agree that while I was hearing other people say that the game was just kind of meh, I had a hard time believing it, but it really is the thing. I even ran into the exact same bug that was on the Giant Bomb Quick Look. There is a certain area that's blocked off by a barrier. You have to kill all the enemies in that area. Either both in my gameplay and the Giant Bomb Quick Look, we both did not find one of the enemies because they got stuck behind some kind of wall somewhere, or the game simply just did not take down the barrier. So I was going in a completely wrong direction. In fact, the exact same wrong direction that they did on Giant Bomb. I'm literally just copying them, not intentionally, but I thought that really was the way you were supposed to go. And it turns out, no, that's not the case. That it was just a glitch. So one assumes that'll get patched. But even with a patch 6 months from now, I don't think I'd want to go back and play Control. And Control feels like it's designed to be played over and over again. I have no idea why they think people would want to do that.
For justice.
And it's a Metroidvania game, but I don't really feel a need to go around and find everything that's collectible. It also gives you these random quests that just pop up where it wants you to go into a different area and just fight some people. I see no reason why you'd ever want to do that at all. It's really ridiculous.
Got something to hide?
So yeah, there's just a ton of little problems with the game as it is that I feel like 6 months more and a better leadership could have fixed. I do like the general environment and the story. The idea of objects of power makes sense, but they also are trying to tie it into like the Alan Wake universe and some of the other Remedy games, the quantum, what is that? Not Quantum Dream, that's a different company, but I think. I don't even remember. The game that Remedy made before this, which was a time travel game. It feels like Control should have some time travel elements in it, and they probably took those out because the previous game had time travel elements in it.
Reporting for duty.
Show me.
The battle.
It's going to be okay.
Control is better than your average, like, triple I indie game that tries to be a triple A. I think. I do think there's more story and there's more visual polish and more effort in it and more level design in it than had an indie game been made trying to tell the same story. That being said, I'm not sure if I was to play Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice right after playing Control, if I wouldn't say actually Hellblade did it better by keeping things short and sweet and just making it a 5-hour experience instead of Control, which is definitely trying to stretch it out to a 10-hour experience at the very least, probably 15 to 20-hour experience, for no good reason. Anyways, I've been talking about Control for a long time. In fact, it's been nearly an hour and 15 minutes, so I'm kind of obsessed with that. Well, it's been an hour and 15 minutes for the episode. So let's cover the news. I said I was going to do this a while ago and then got distracted myself.
The battle. The battle.
Show me.
So the biggest story is still kind of developing, but Sid Alpha, I think in particular, covers it enough because of how Sid Alpha covered it that I can take my opinion from that too. So our biggest story today, Gamma Sutra has, is the obituary for the Night in the Woods co-creator Alec Holowaka. He's a Canadian independent game developer who worked on Night in the Woods, Aquaria, and others. Let's see. What's not mentioned, though, is that, until down to this point, is that he's dead because he killed himself because of cancel culture, and Zoe Quinn accusing him and several other people, several other game developers, of sexual assault and abusive behavior. Now, take it for whatever it's worth, Zoe Quinn recently was pretty much proven to have run out of money, and she definitely had run out of attention. I'm not a doctor, but I would suspect Zoe Quinn and people like her suffer from Munchausen syndrome, a desperate psychological need to get attention. Now, Sid Alpha said he probably believed the accusations that were made against him, but these are accusations of him just being a jerk that happened 10 years ago. So, and Gamergate's anniversary is around the corner, so there's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt getting thrown around here. A lot of BS getting thrown around, certainly. I believe Zoe Quinn is the person that started Gamergate. She was sleeping with a lot of mainstream video game journalists, and they were writing about her game and giving them good reviews, which that mostly is a criticism of the journalists and them being unethical, more than her sleeping around or trying to sleep her way to the top, although that's her morals and you can make a judgment on that. Let's start with, I guess, a Paladin and Priest game on the European account. The usual crew came out in one way to get attention, so Anita Sarkeesian and the other one, I forget her name, also certainly jumped on the bandwagon. There is a third one that's running for government and for Congress, and definitely I'm hoping does not win, and I think there's a very little chance she will win. It's insane that people are supporting her at all, but there kind of is this unholy trinity of Gamergate people that scream Gamergate. They weren't involved with the original movement. They were anti-Gamergate groups.
Is someone injured?
And still are to this day. So this was public accusations that pushed somebody to kill themselves in the long run. If this person had been guilty of these, if Alec Hollowick had been guilty of these actions, which are one would assume that there's two sides to the story, and the other side of the story is actually no. Would be very, very different from Zoe Quinn's side of the story. Even if it was true, Zoe Quinn never filed any kind of legal complaint or anything like that. She certainly didn't go down any kind of legal process. She instead just waited 10 years and accused something. Much like the Vic Mignogna case, much like how we've seen a lot of these things happen. And I think compared to like the Harvey Weinstein situation, you can also take for a fact that when people were accusing Harvey Weinstein, a lot of people came out and accused him. Not just one person, and most definitely not the same person that had made similar accusations or had really such bad character through their own actions and their own statements that they really shouldn't have been given any credibility at all. Inherently, Zoe Quinn is not somebody that should have any credibility. I believe also that last time I checked, she was also still moved over from not making video games that she kickstarted to potentially making comic books, although I wouldn't be surprised if she's actually not making comic books anymore either. I mean, she really is just a hot mess wherever she goes, to not go too far into it. But even if everything was true, which I don't know if I fully believe everything was true the way Zoe Quinn phrases things. Waiting 10 years and then trying to basically get him canceled and depersoned drove him to kill himself. It drove the other people who worked at Night of the Woods to disassociate with him. So it's not just a case of Zoe Quinn attacked him publicly. It's a case that someone attacked him publicly, and then other people dogpiled and supported Zoe Quinn for no good reason. Like, there should be nobody that listens to Zoe Quinn and believes anything she says. That this is getting ridiculous, and it really just has got to boil down to file charges or it didn't happen. Like, that's really what it has to boil down to. If you didn't file charges in a reasonable amount of time in which charges could have been filed, which is anywhere, I think, in the United States based on what the crime is, it could be anywhere from as little as 6 months to to 3 years. To some cases, you can file charges whenever. Like, there's no statute of limitations for some crimes. But if you didn't file a complaint, if you didn't file a charge, if you can't prove some documentation somewhere, something more than you just thought this happened and talked to your girlfriend, and thus your girlfriend or your friend in general has a text saying that you said these things happened. Like, I can't really believe people anymore. It's become far too easy to make false accusations. It's always been far too easy to make false accusations, but people, I think, at least had some sanity about themselves in the old days, and that is long since gone. So yeah, this is a whole mess, certainly, and it has cost somebody a life. Several people who tweeted out support for Zoe Quinn have now deactivated or deleted their account on Twitter, trying to hide the fact that they ever supported this action. That they definitely don't want the consequences now of their actions. They definitely I can't really say. I'm not sure what a lot of the cancel culture people wanted there. I mean, they often act like they want somebody to kill themselves and just disappear. So I don't know if this actually means that they're happy and this is exactly what they wanted, and secretly they're super thrilled by this outcome, or if I would assume and hope that they just didn't really think of the consequences of their actions. But this is certainly where it was going to go. When you're actively trying to stop a person from having a career in a field that's a very incestuous field like video games, the video game field should be less incestuous, but it is. It totally is. It is surrounded by groupthink. What did you think was going to happen? And there certainly have been instances where people have left their entire career field, gone and worked in a different industry, and they still get chased by these accusations and these claims. Like, there are vindictive people, certainly, that have tried to chase people down for the rest of their life. I would say, as I want to move on here, because there's mostly his opinion piece, like, but I would say on a surface level, as a video game person, as a person who enjoys video games, the video game industry is not better than it was a couple of days ago or a week ago when Alec Holowka was alive. It is in no way better. If he had not been made, if Zoe Quinn had not made these accusations, and he was still alive, he would still be making video games, and we would, as a society, be enjoying the fruits of his labor. What Zoe Quinn did, and anytime anybody listens to Zoe Quinn, in my opinion, this is what happens. She makes things worse. By far. She has done very, very little, to close to nothing, to make the video game industry better. Because her one indie game, I think Depression Quest is what she made, is not really that good, not really worth playing. Particularly now, knowing Zoe Quinn. Her taking a bunch of Kickstarter money to make another game that never got made, did nothing for the video game industry. It hurt the video game industry by far. her announcing that she was out of money while being on vacation in Japan certainly does not instill confidence in kickstarting video games, so that hurt the industry. Like, every action she takes is a negative action, and so you don't even have to look at the person and say she's a bad person or anything like that. You can just look at the actions, and this is how I would hope and wish for all people to think, and all potential criminal systems to work, is just look at the actions and the outcomes. Zoe Quinn is clearly not good for video games. Anita Sarkeesian was clearly not good for video games. Like, her taking money for her Kickstarter kind of under false premises. There was a lot of people that wanted her to do what she said she was going to do originally, and then she did something that was slightly different from what she said she was going to do. So people that actually funded her were not happy with the final product. So yeah.
That minion already attacked.
Yeah, Anita Sarkeesian not good for the video game industry in any way. And then the third one, I can't even remember her name, that's running for Congress, is not good for the country, I think, at all, because she is bringing in the ideas of Gamergate and she's bringing in anti-Gamergate ideas and into potential legal lawmaking procedures, and so she's coming from that false narrative that all video games players are these toxic, masculine degenerates. And so if she was elected to Congress, I don't know if any of her laws would pass, or any of her bills would pass, but almost certainly she would introduce concepts and introduce bills that would be negative for the video game industry and video game players in general. So yeah, it's a sad statement, but I can't think of anybody who is even slightly against what Gamergate originally stood by that I could say acted out of a true belief and good intentions. I feel like they all acted from a delusional belief and self-motivated intentions. There almost certainly were people out there, myself included, that were not involved in Gamergate that said, well, I had nothing to do with it, but I kind of agree with the original idea of people like Zoe Quinn shouldn't be allowed to sleep with video game journalists, and the video game journalist shouldn't be then allowed to review people's games if they are sleeping with video game creators. Like, I agree with journalistic ethics, but I was not even aware Gamergate existed until months and months after it had happened. And I was definitely not happy with the way it was presented as this anti-woman movement that it really never, I think, was. And even if it had turned into that, it doesn't mean anything to me, because I'm just saying, personally, I believe video game journalists and all journalists should have ethics. That's not a controversial statement. I do believe that there is a lack of ethics in the video game journalist world, the mainstream video game journalist world particularly. And, well, even non-mainstream, there's a lot of lack of ethics. And that, in part, made me become a journalist. Speaking of journalists, during the latest, I believe, Giant Beast cast, the Giant Bomb East podcast, they said directly that Giant Bomb hires no news reporters at all. None of them claim to be news reporters. Maybe it wasn't the exact phrase news reporters, but they may have said journalists. And that is ridiculous. That is so ridiculous to say. Because then I have no idea what any of the employees at Giant Bomb are. If they're not calling themselves journalists. If they're not reporting on their experiences, maybe they're editorial columnists in a sense because they're playing video games and talking about their experiences there. But the idea that Giant Bomb, being owned by CBS Interactive and being so close to GameSpot, the idea that none of them ever get bits of news is actively disprovable. I could go through old Giant Bombcast and say, here's a point where they say specifically that they got some inside information. At that point, you're a journalist. At that point, you're reporting on news. Just because you don't try really hard to always report on all the news in your podcast doesn't mean you're not a journalist. And it's a real funny position to take, to say, oh, it doesn't, to say we're not a journalist, thus we don't have to have any ethics, which is effectively what they're trying to say, I think, is that we're not a journalist, therefore we don't have to do any real work, or we don't have to ensure accuracy in our reporting or do any research or anything. It's an interesting question on this page, which I'm still on the obituary, by the way. Is this a little bit of yellow journalism to say has died instead of has committed suicide? Has reportedly committed suicide. I don't know why you just say died. This is really another case of, so often when they do obituaries in, frankly, any reporting site, they don't want to put the cause of death. They don't want to mention any hard facts. Again, a lack of desire to actually do actual journalism seems very strange. I don't know what small bit of yellow journalism that would do other than to hide the fact that it's a suicide, but then they also they also later down in the article mention it's a suicide, but they hide it down like three or four posts, paragraphs, so that might be the case. Well, moving on, TechRaptor has the probably next biggest story. It was quite the worst time possible for my computer to break. Chucklefish responds to volunteer dev exploitation allegations. Allegations came out that Chucklefish, the creator of Starbound, exploited people. They exploited unpaid volunteers to create the game.
I must move quickly.
These allegations started when Damon Reese, who is credited as the writer on Starbound, is the lead writer on Route 59 Games' Necro Barista. According to the thread, they worked for hundreds of hours for no pay, even when Starbound sold 2.5 million copies in the first week. Now, on the face of it, this feels like what they did, and this is a problem that I've made this mistake, and I've seen a lot of other people make this mistake, is they didn't set expectations at the beginning, and thus they let themselves So, never work for free is the motto of every creator ever. Like, never work for free if you can, unless you really believe in the project and you want to be a part of it. Unless that project is your dream, you never work for free. And you never work for promises of pay with no hard numbers and no contract. And I totally see how at the beginning something like Starbound would look like a game that wasn't ever going to sell a lot and that this would be just some small indie project. But even if it was seemingly going to be a small indie project, instead of selling 2.5 million copies in the first week, you should have said, well, then I need some default pay. You know, if you worked for hundreds of hours, then at $7.50, you should have gotten $1,500 if you really worked for hundreds of hours. That's minimum wage right there. So you horribly devalued yourself if you agreed to work for free. I don't know how that's not going to be the case as we move down the story. So let's see. Now, the only way this wouldn't be my takeaway from that is that they promised to pay money, or the checks bounced or something like that. Let's see, here you have the tweet. I started out my game dev career working on Starbound for almost 2 years. I was 16. I worked hundreds of hours. So yeah, a kid getting abused. I worked for hundreds of hours and wasn't paid a single cent for it while the company made unbelievable amounts of money off my labor. And that of around a dozen other employee unpaid workers. Let's see. So Chucklefish's statement regarding this, which will probably be something that's pretty obvious, is going to be, my guess, exactly, we'd never agreed to pay these people. They always knew that they were working for free. There was no form of anything. Like, there might be grounds for a lawsuit if they said you have to work these number of hours, you have to do this, you have to do that, and oh, by the way, we're not paying you. At that point, you might be considered an employee and required to be paid in a lawsuit. But in most cases, that's not really how it's going to boil down. I could have won right then. So the quote from Chucklefish is, during the time both the core crew and community contributors were collaborating via chat room and dedicated their time for free. Community contributors were under no obligation to create content, work to deadlines, or put in any particular number of hours. Everyone was credited or remunerated as part of their agreement, which is basically legal speak to say, yeah, these weren't employees, we didn't have to pay them, they were volunteers. At a certain point, it might be a smart move to say, actually, let's not have contributions, let's not have volunteers, let's get people on the payroll so we can get some guaranteed work out of them and do everything the right way. But very few companies are ethical enough to do that, where they would say we wouldn't take free work. The comment continues, it's almost been a decade since Starbound's development first began, and from then Chucklefish has grown considerably into an indie studio that has a strong emphasis on good working practices, providing a welcoming environment for all employees and freelancers. Our doors remain open to any related parties who wish to discuss their concerns with us directly. So yeah, talk to us directly. And there is a certain point here to say, it would have been a much better tweet and a much better complaint that you weren't getting paid if you came out and said, oh, by the way, I've talked to these people and they refuse to pay me anything for my hundreds of hours that I put in it. On the other hand, here's a copyright idea. Your volunteer employees, therefore, don't you own the copyright of everything you made? So you can claim that they need to license your content unless you agree to some kind of agreement, which arguably they probably didn't, or if they did agree to something, that would be such an unbalanced contract that it would be invalidatable very easily, would be my guess. I'm no lawyer, of course, but yeah, if you signed a contract that says you're going to work for free and you're going to give us all the fruits of your labor and the license and the copyright to all of that seems unrealistically imbalanced as a contract.
Job's done.
And you can't have unrealistically imbalanced contracts. So, had the tweet gone out saying that that we are, I've talked to this person and they refuse to pay me, then I think at that point you need to say, well, they have my copyrighted content in there and I'm going to file DMCA and I'm going to sue them. And the way the DMCA and copyright infringement works, that would be all of the profits of Starbound. So any lawsuit that you came about and said they used my copyright, all the profits procured from using that copyright would go to the first person that sued, which is another reason why you really wouldn't want to have freelance employees. You've put yourself in a specifically dangerous legal position because of that. The article continues. Reese responded to the statement by acknowledging they did not sign a contract, as contributors were required to sign one to work on the game. They did sign a contract. Interesting. Oh, I'm reading this wrong. So they did sign a contract. The contract also came with the possibility of employment at Chucklefish. This contract probably is invaluable. However, they did dispute the claim of no deadline, saying deadlines were absolutely in place, if not formal, then definitely implied. He called out the Chucklefish founder Finn Bryce as the primary source of pressure volunteers faced. Shame is a powerful motivator, and Finn Bryce is highly adept at using it to manipulate people, they said. It sounds like they were employees if they signed the contract. See if we could see that contract. It sounds to me like they were actual employees, and because they were actual employees, they do deserve to be paid. But it is almost a catch-22. Like, either they're employees and they deserve to be paid because of that, minimum wage for every hour in some lawsuit, which is where this would have to end up, or they aren't employees and then they own the copyrights to the entire game, to the elements of the game.
Alright, who's thirsty?
Meanwhile, as far as I'm concerned as a gamer in Starbound, Starbound has come and gone as a space-based 2D Minecraft style game, and I think I do own it, but I don't I don't think I really care to play it or cover it. You're forced to sign a contract and waive away any right to compensation. Yeah, that contract is invalid. That contract would not stand. Like, you could easily do a two-pronged attack on the lawsuit here to say either you deserved to be paid at least minimum wage for all of your hours, or you deserve all of the profits because they used your copyrighted material. At the very least, this is the beginnings of a lawsuit that could be dragged out and cost Chucklefish millions just because they ran their business bad. So yeah, that is definitely no way to start developing a game. You would have been better off, frankly, giving just shares written on on napkins. If you said, for his contributions to this game we're developing, I give 5% of all the shares, 5% of all the profits, not gross revenue, of the game. Like that's kind of how you do it, and then you wouldn't have to pay them, but until the game was profitable, and if the game was never profitable, then their shares are worthless. But at the least at that point they're getting contributed, they're getting paid something fairly, and you haven't opened yourself up to say to them either making a very good argument that they were employees and thus deserved minimum wage, or that they were, or that you're using their copyrighted content without a license, and thus you would have to pay them all of your profit for the infringement. I think I'm going in a circle at this point, but it's not a good way to start your business. And I know whenever you start a business, it's always smiles and handshake deals, and everybody thinks it's going to go great. It never goes great. Everything should be written down. Everything should be legal. Everybody should be acting as professional as possible at all times, because this is probably going to go bad in one way or another. The best case scenario for starting a new business would be that it only slightly goes bad, or it only goes bad in a small scenario. We're gonna have to wrap up this recording probably after this game, so we barely covered 2 news articles and a few Steam games. I went through all the Steam games and got rid of a lot of them, a lot of just BS things, but there's some more recent ones that'll probably be some BS games. We have here Fiery Catacombs, which looks like a Spelunky game clone. It doesn't look like there's anything too terrible with it. It's just the tile set's not particularly varied enough, and the gameplay looks kind of generic. It's $1.27 English only. That's not gonna make it to the fall list. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm actually logged out of Steam, so we'll see if that stays or not. Oh, by the way, getting the NVIDIA GeForce experience to work, apparently my ad blocker was literally blocking them, so NVIDIA.com websites, because they do so much ads anyways, that so the ad blocker on my router, the block list that I was downloading, had NVIDIA in it, so I had to I put in some code that I'm not sure works to fix that, and I'll enable that code later. But it certainly has been a nightmare for at least 6 months where I've just not been able to use the GeForce Experience, and I've uninstalled and reinstalled and done clean installs, and it had nothing to do with anybody else's problem. It literally has to do with the fact that the GeForce Experience will not work unless it can connect to their ad servers, or what have been blacklisted as their ad servers, which they just need to change their domain. There needs to be a G40 experience domain just for that stuff. But I guess technically the GeForce Experience is showing ads in its own thing. But you can't claim I couldn't get the games that I came free with the video card unless I could get the GeForce Experience. So I definitely was in a situation where potentially I was going to lose out on $120 worth of games, assuming both of those games are $60 games, which I'm not sure they actually are, both Control and Wolfenstein Youngbloods. And I'll play Wolfenstein Youngbloods out of order. I don't see a reason to try and play Wolfenstein 2 or the New Blood or anything like that, since the story is just tangentially connected anyways. So yeah, I was definitely in a position where I was going to get shortchanged out of those games. And by the way, Wolfenstein Youngblood is a Bethesda.net game, so both of those games theoretically I would like on my Steam account. Maybe by the time I play them it won't really matter that much. It's getting kind of desperate, to say the least, with a lot of these games. Things like Borderlands 3. At this point I'm not even sure I care to own Borderlands 3. I'm definitely not going to cover it with the way 2K has been acted, and I already have Borderlands a pre-sequel. I don't think I'm going to cover that, so for the same reason. So there's definitely a growing list of blacklisted games due to bad behavior of the developers or publishers, or just games like Control I may not buy on Steam just because it's not something I'd ever want to play a second time. There probably is a point too where I should say I've got most of the games I am ever gonna need on Steam, so I'm lowering it down to just buying newer things. It was always the plan, and it seems like we're gonna hit that point pretty quickly, because I've got so many of the old games at this point. It's hard to even fill in the gaps. This next game we have on Steam is called Fables of Talamus, and it feels like it's trying to make it look like the Microsoft Lion's Head game Fables in this logo, but the game itself looks like an MS Paint piece of garbage game, so there's really no polish here. $9.89 discounted, English only. Yep. That game's not going to make it to the follow list. And I think we'll probably do 2 episodes, and this is a good point to break up the first episode. I should have done it 40 minutes ago. So, as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. I probably need to redo my Patreon at this point. It would be way better right now if I had Patreon supporters, true fans, the best of the best fans that were supporting me. We could cut YouTube out of the picture, and then I'd never have to care about being monetized on YouTube, although that would be a nice extra income, and I would feel then potentially be funded to continue running my YouTube channel, which is what I really want to do, instead of having to think about jumping fields and going to work somewhere else, which is not really what I want to do. So anyways, yeah, thank you for watching. Have a good evening.